We're very much getting to that point in the month where it's time to start thinking about the month ahead. And while I already have the pages of next month set up, and there is a separate video on the channel for that, today we're very much looking at the migration process. So going from the month we're currently in, which is February, and then bringing things forward into March, making plans for the month ahead, getting things like my actions list set up, filling in my habit tracker, that kind of thing. So today we're going to have a look at that full process. The first thing we're going to need to do though is see where we're at the moment. So for February, you may remember we were going with a science theme. So I tea stained the pages of my notebook for that. We're going to have a look at the projects list, see what has and hasn't been done there. The cover page doesn't need anything extra. We have the monthly log, which we should probably check some things off of. As per usual, we've gotten towards the end of the month and I've kind of been neglecting it. We've also got my actions list that we're going to have to review, and my habit tracker, which we'll need to have a look at as well, especially when it comes to considering which of these habits I might want to bring forward. And as part of the actions list, we're also going to have to decide what actions I want to take in March too. We've also got the Instagram schedule and the posting elsewhere page. This one more so just needs me to check things off and then maybe think about the content that I'm going to be posting in March too. I do already have some ideas about that. I do try and plan a little bit in advance, especially because I'm going to be away in March. But the monthly reflection, you can see I've kind of half filled in at the moment. I like to try and fill this in as the month progresses, just so I don't have to try and remember everything when it comes to the end of the month. But now as we're approaching the end of month, we can fill in a bit more of that. And then after this, we're into the daily logs. There's not going to be a lot to do on the daily log pages, just mainly go through and make sure that everything in here has either been done or crossed off because I decided not to do it, or migrated to another place. So it's essentially just going through and looking for any open tasks, ones that just have the dot, and pulling those to where they need to go, or crossing them off, or whatever else. When I got to about midway in the month, I decided to stop doing the kind of like do the day and then write out the next header and fill in that, and then write out the next header and fill in that kind of a thing. Instead, I just decided to put the header for each of the days up the top. I ignored days that I knew I wasn't going to do a lot on. So for instance, this one's the 18th through to the 21st, and then we have the 22nd to the 25th, but I don't have the 26th or 7th or 8th because I know that the 25th is barely going to have anything on it, so I can probably fit all 3 days in here. I'm just not too sure where they're going to go yet. And then after this one, we had our checklist for before you go, so everything that I needed to get done before I went on my trip, which we should probably also look at because there is still plenty to get done. What I'm actually going to start with in terms of our migration though is a brain dump, and if you don't like that term, you could call it something like a mind unwind or an on my mind list or something like that. I'm just going to write them all down in this space here because it is currently Wednesday for me, and if I spill over into Thursday, that's fine too. I've kind of gotten to the point in the month where I'm not really too fussed about things being in the lists for the actual days, and I don't want to waste the space that I have. For this part, I'm just using a black pen, and I actually managed to find myself a Papermate Inkjoy, which I'm very pleased about, so let's write a list. As the term brain dump suggests, this is just me getting everything in my mind onto the paper. It's much easier to do the migration process, I feel, if you've gotten everything in your head out. Mainly because if you're anything like me, there might be certain thoughts in your mind that are kind of just going on and on repeat. Like, oh, you really need to put on your laundry. You should probably do your laundry. We should probably schedule a time to do your laundry. By putting it down on my list, I don't have to worry about forgetting that. So my mind kind of switches off from reminding me that it needs to be done. This just gives me some mental freedom to focus on other parts of the reset process. Usually I'd be inclined to write my brain dump on a separate piece of paper or in a separate notebook, so it could just be kind of messy and done very quickly. But as said, I just have a lot of free space going on in my February pages because I haven't really been using them because I've been busy and I neglect my journal when I'm busy. So I'd rather just use the space in here. This list I can come back to throughout the migration process and add things to it if I need to. Now we're going to flip back and work through our February pages sequentially. So starting at the projects list and having a look at which ones of these did get done and which ones didn't. And from those ones that didn't, which ones can still get done in February and which ones need to get moved through to March. So for example, my travel bujo ideas video was supposed to get done this month, but it's actually getting moved forward just because I didn't have like the kind of mental capacity to really work on it this month. I felt like it required more creativity than I kind of had in the month of Feb. The monthly reset we are currently doing, though we are calling it a monthly migration more so because we're not looking at the full reset process because that also involves things like tidying up my office, doing a kind of self-care reset, like doing a hair mask and a face mask and things like that, doing a digital reset by clearing out my inbox, so on and so forth. I do have separate videos on that full process, and there's a playlist in the description box. April theme ideas, that one's one that you can look forward to because that's coming up next month. April plan with me, I was going to do before I left, but the idea of setting up for April when we're not even in March yet was just no. And the notebook therapy review is coming, it is happening, I just need to finalize it before I go. Now, onto my patron tasks. I have done the tracker printables. I still need to do the wallpaper, the live stream is scheduled, we've done the hangout, I still need to do the welcomes. So I'm actually going to move all of the ones on here that aren't done into my brain dump so that I have them all kind of in one place with all of the rest of my tasks. Now as those have all been moved over, that means that our projects list is done. I do have 2 other sections down the bottom. I didn't actually end up using them, so we can just flip on forward to the monthly log. Now, I'm pretty sure everything on here that came before got done. This one does say Patreon Live, it was just a regular live stream, so I accidentally put these 2 the wrong way around, but that's okay. Laundry is actually probably getting done today, so we can move that forward. Shrove Tuesday happened, Bujo Wednesday is going to happen. For the dots on the calendar, I'm just using the Zig Clean Color dot marker, very handy tool, probably one of my favorites. And we can just add that laundry is happening today. Last week, editing and filming happened. We also did have the patron hangout. I can't remember what these dots were actually for. I think I was probably just scheduling out what I was kind of doing each of those days. And from memory, that was just filming, and the next one was just editing. Notably, we are currently only on the 22nd, so I can't actually fill in any of those just yet, but they are coming up. I don't think anything from here is getting pushed forward to my next monthly calendar, so no need to migrate anything from this just yet. Flipping over to the actions list though, and there's not a lot on here I think that I can actually check off at this stage. I mean, I have populated my pre-trip checklist, but I still might add more things to it. And I haven't completed it by any stretch of the imagination. There are still many things to get done. I can't do any of these ones here until the end of the month, to the extent where I think these ones might actually happen in March because I leave for my trip before March actually starts. So I might actually just give myself some grace and migrate those forward. By putting these little arrows in, it means I already know that I've decided that those ones are going to be moved forward into my next action list when we actually get to setting that up. Picking videoable 101 things, we are also going to migrate that just because I don't really have enough time before my trip to get that one done. Getting things on my pre-trip shopping list I have already started, and then the things on my 101 things list both happen within the next week, so can't check those off just yet. I did get a good chunk of tasks done from my Discord moderator team though. I just haven't made the canned responses, so that is going to get moved forward as well. But otherwise, I think we did a very good job there. Same with the Discord server rules. Some of these I will move to that brain dump, not all of them, because I don't need to put down a task of celebrating my friend's wedding. It's just kind of gonna happen. And same idea with our trip, but the other stuff I do still need to do, so. In terms of the ones down the bottom, now, because of the aforementioned busyness of February, I have not been keeping up with my weekly reset at all, or reviewing of the non-essential spending, because I haven't even been populating my budget. I did get it populated in the last week, so it is nice to have it up to date, but this is certainly an area that I've been neglecting. I'm not going to check off that I haven't done them in our current week just yet, but there is a good chance that those don't get done. In terms of JCC connection time though, those ones have happened for every week of the month, so that's really awesome to see. So those are things like live streams and hangouts and stuff like that. So although there are some areas that have certainly not gotten accomplished this month, there are others that have, so I can still be proud of that progress. Because these two haven't happened for every single week in the month pretty much, that also gives me an opportunity to reflect on why that is. For instance, have I made those tasks too cumbersome? What's been getting in the way of them? How could I make them easier? But we'll look at that when we get to the reflection page. In terms of my habit tracker, we didn't actually tick off any of our habits from yesterday, so that's helpful. But I'll just go in quickly and tick off the ones that have or haven't happened. On this tracker, a tick means that the thing did get done, and a black dot means that it didn't. And we can see that there are certainly a lot more black dots on this one compared to the same trackers from January. Again, this just goes to show how busy the month has been. A lot of these things I start to fall off on when I'm under a time crunch. For instance, one of the things that I was doing really well in January was this one here, little clock, which means no work after dinner time. And you can see, especially towards the middle of the month and on, I have certainly been working after dinner time because I'm just trying to get everything done before our trip so that I have all of my content to release. Again, we could look at this like, oh my gosh, Jess is failing at her habits, like this is awful. Or it's just a moment to say, hey, obviously things were going on that meant that this stuff didn't get done. I'm not going to be hard on myself because there's like no point in that. Beating myself up about not getting these things done is not going to change the fact that they didn't happen. And it's also not going to make me feel any more motivated to get them done moving forward. I am hoping in like about 2 days time, we won't be having work in the evening again because I will be kind of up to date or like ready with everything that needs to release. So that's all good. Flipping over, my Instagram schedule actually kind of got a little bit messed around. So some of these got released, some of them didn't, some of them got changed. I have at least been posting 3 times a day for the entire month though, so I feel good about that. It's just that some of these things aren't the things that got posted, if that kind of makes sense. I think I might just put in like a symbol or something to say that it was something different. Maybe that could work. So for instance, these weekly ideas, I know they weren't the ones that got posted, it was something else. So I might just draw like a little kind of shuffle play kind of looking thing, which really just looks like an X. I'm just gonna draw an X, that's nice. So it's not that it didn't get done, it's just that it got changed. And then the rest of these, even though they weren't necessarily on the day that I've listed them for, they did actually get posted, so I'm gonna tick them off. All the reading ideas got done. I actually started keeping this list digitally because things were just getting chopped and changed around. But hopefully the one that I set up for March is actually going to be more correct and more stuck to. In terms of the elsewhere posting, the Friday fun has already been scheduled to release, so that's fine. The YouTube video for Thursday, it's scheduled to release, but the Facebook page post for it hasn't been scheduled. So I'm actually going to end up doing that one later, so we can leave that one as it is. And then flipping over, we have the reflection. Now I have a couple more things to add to this one, so we're going to do that one now. For my reflection process, I usually just like to put on some music and just kind of let my thoughts take me where they do. I don't necessarily start in the top left and work my way to the bottom right. I kind of let my mind jump around because that's just what it naturally tends towards. And of course, as mentioned, we're not quite at the end of the month yet, so I may have some other things to add to this one too. I will say that my monthly reflection pages have been one of my favorites as part of my setups this year. Yes, we are only technically 2 months into the year in terms of setups and having actually used the pages, but I'm still very sold on them. I've got a bit of extra space on my memories in particular and my wins section. I have some extra space on the goals worked on, but I don't plan on working on any more goals, so that one's probably going to be fine as it is. But the rest of the sections are looking quite full. Notably, can't do the finances until the very end of the month, so that is a future me problem. Now as we've dealt with all of the kind of monthly setup pages, the next part of the migration process is to have a look through all of my dailies and make sure that I've actually migrated these things forward or crossed them off or done them, etc. I do typically try to do this week to week, so it isn't a huge laborious task at the end of the month, but as mentioned, February, busy, planner neglect. This is another one where I can just put on some music or put on something in the background and just work through each of these tasks one by one, really just paying attention to the ones that haven't been fully crossed off. So anything that has a partial slash or just a bullet point. The things I need to consider for these tasks are, do they still need to be done? So can I like bring them forward into that brain dump we were doing before? Or do they belong somewhere else? Maybe in a different collection that I've either got in this notebook or in a different notebook? Or of course, if it doesn't need to be done and it doesn't need to be migrated, we can just cross those off. From here though, we are finished with the February pages, or the pages from the current month. So we've gone through all of the monthly setup pages and made sure they've all been populated, filled in, things brought forward if they needed to be. We've gone through all of the daily logs and made sure that all of the tasks and notes and whatnot from those are in one central place or in the places that they should be, whether that be other journals, other planners, other collections, whatever else. And that means we're now ready to actually get into next month. So next month we have the projects list, as per usual. We have the monthly log to fill in. We've also got the actions list to set up, the habit tracker to set up. We have the content schedule to populate. And then after this, I've just got a notes page, which we don't need to fill anything in for. And I also need to set up my sections for my review. Something that I'm going to do actually before I get into my March pages, and this isn't necessarily common for every month, it's just because I'm going away, like I've said, and I do have that list of all the stuff that I need to get done before I go. I want to have a look through this list, make sure I've checked everything off, and then anything that still needs to be done, I can add to that brain dump we have. Again, just so everything's in the same place. It's going to be much easier to get everything I need to get done if I only have one place to look for those tasks. So, what do we still need to do? The process for looking through this one is much the same as the daily logs from before, so just going through anything that has an open task bullet, so just a dot or a half cross, considering has it already been done, can I cross it off? Does it still need to be done? So I should move that to the brain dump, or if it's been moved or it's not a priority anymore, I could just cross that off. Notably, anything I'm crossing off on these lists either isn't getting done, but more commonly, it's going to get done, just not before I go. It's also good to note that some of these things I have already bought into my brain dump, so I don't need to write them out again. In particular, my patron perks, which we did to start with. I already know that that brain dump has a couple of double ups because I effectively forgot that I'd already written the thing down, but that's okay. It just means I do one task and cross two things off. I will also note that I wrote this down as a before you go list, but some of these were never going to be done before I went. For instance, my Discord digests, those ones I post at the end of each week, so these ones are more so going to happen while I'm away. Same idea with my patron welcomes. I welcome all of my new patrons once a week. I go and contact each of them individually. It's just a little bit easier rather than kind of constantly checking in throughout the week, but those ones will happen while I'm away as well. This one says it's a rainbow swatching live. It was just kind of like regular swatching. I mean, technically they were in rainbow order, so like it kind of counts. But I actually have another live video planned, which is kind of more in line with that title. Just need to add one last thing to that brain dump, and then we can get into March. Alright, the brain dump's looking good. You are updated, which is good as well. March. Now, we have the projects list to start with. That one's kind of nice and easy because it's just pulled from my YouTube schedule and my regular patron tasks that I do every month. I'm going to fill in the patron tasks because, as said, they are the same each time. But the YouTube one we're going to leave blank for now because, spoilers. One of the things I've actually really been enjoying from February is writing kind of in italics for my task lists, and I think I want to continue that for March, so we're going to write in italics here. We've got our patron list populated now. As said, YouTube we're going to leave behind. I might do a kind of like home projects list here, but I'll probably fill that in once March actually starts. Flipping over though, and we can start to populate our monthly log. And I know that having my monthly log populated before the month actually starts gives me so much peace. It means that I actually kind of know what's going on and what's coming up. For this one, we're again going to use a combination of the dot marker to put in like kind of effectively a checkbox or a check dot for each of the different events, and then the black pen to write in what the events are. When it comes to populating my monthly log, it's a combination of pulling things from my Outlook calendar, just noting down things that are regular occurrences like Bujo Wednesday. I'll also include things like themed days, whether that be like laundry day, filming day, editing day, and pretty much anything else. This would also be an opportunity to check in with your future log, which I admittedly forgot to do when I was filling this one in. And although the monthly log and I have an interesting relationship, I do still value having it in my setup, even if I don't check in with it as much as I probably could. Having all of this stuff on the calendar is making me feel much better about knowing what's going on in the month coming up. Obviously, the first half of the month is quite full, and then the bottom half of the month is a little bit more open because I'll be getting back into doing my work. I'm not too sure at this stage which days are going to be filming or editing days, or which days I'm going to be doing the groceries or whatever else. But those are all in here, looking good. Flipping over, we then have the actions list and the habit tracker. And now to fill in my actions list, I actually need to decide what my actions are going to be. If you're not aware, my actions list is effectively like an action plan. It's like, what steps do I need to take to reach the goals that I'm working on? And as we saw in the February actions list, this is split into one-off or monthly actions, weekly actions, and daily actions. Those daily actions get tracked on my habit tracker though, which is why I like to have those two pages next to each other. So before we decide on the habit tracker items, we need to decide on the action list items, because the habits that I put on here are dictated by what I deem my actions to be for the month. For this though, we're going to need to go and have a look at a different journal. This one here is my brainstorming book where I did all of my initial goal planning at the start of the year, or technically the end of last year, and kind of mapping out each of my goals and what I need to do to accomplish them. One of the kind of exciting parts about this is that some of these goals are going to be completed in March. So for instance, my Washington DC goal is going to get completed because we're actually taking the trip. We've also got the JCC meetup goal, which is happening in Washington DC, which will happen while I'm there. And then these other ones are more kind of like slow build or over a longer period of time goals. So they won't necessarily be completed, but we can still work on them. For this part of the migration process though, it's really just about going through each of the pages for the action steps that I've brainstormed for each of my goals and pulling out ones that I might want to do in the month ahead. Now, because I am not going to be around for a good chunk of March, I'm not expecting to have too many action steps, but as said, we're going to have a look through these pages and pull out anything that I can do during that month. So we'll flip back to the first page, make it a little easier, work through in order. So for this one, I already have all of my one-off tasks completed. I did that at the start of the year, which means it's really just these ones here. The ones that I do on a monthly basis, once per month, the ones that I do on a weekly basis, once per week, and the things that I do daily. So those daily ones being stuff that I add to my habit tracker. What I am going to do though is grab a separate piece of paper here to jot that stuff down so that then I don't have to come back into this journal to fill in my actions list. It'll all just be on here. So we'll do M/O, so monthly or one-off. We'll do a W for weekly and D for daily. I don't expect to have a lot of daily tasks pretty much for the entire of this year so far. My only daily task for my goals has been tracking my spending. So track spend/no spend days. And for weekly we have the budget population, which I've not been very good at doing, and the reviewing of non-essential spending, which I've also not been very good at doing. It's also good to note that just because things are going onto this list doesn't mean that they are going to actually end up in the actions list. As we go through and I collect these different ideas, I might decide that there's too many or it's not the right time for them or whatever else, but having them all on here will help. So my review of the spending and my cumulative total and writing out my trend statement, also known as my spend trend. So this is just effectively a statement that tells me something about my spending habits. So for instance, am I consistently spending at the end of the week? Or am I consistently breaking my no spend when I have a period of high stress? Yes, that kind of stuff. So this one's done. Flipping over. This goal was my JCC goal, so our community goal, and kind of what things I'm doing regarding building our community. And some of these we can actually check off. So for instance, the rules have been done, which is good. And then we've got a good chunk of the moderator tasks done as well. So selecting the mods, advertising for mods, formalizing guidelines for mods, We also still have the writing of canned responses. So I'm gonna put this here. That one's not probably going to get done in March, but it is something that I need to do. As noted, we do have some monthly and weekly things that I've already decided on down here, so we can pull those out. So JCC connection time, and we've got the scheduling and the reminding so that people actually know that it's going on. For the month ahead, I think that that's probably enough, so we can flip on to the next one. This one's all about the 101 things. So it's very much about pulling out what 101 things I want to do. Some of these are obvious, like going to go wild and having an in-person JashiiCorrin community meetup. Very exciting. I need to select my 101 things for April. And I could pick a videoable 101 things on the list, but I don't think it's the right month for them, which is unfortunate because by the end of March we'll be a quarter of the way through the year, but kind of is what it is in terms of that. At this stage, it's also good to note that my 101 things list isn't actually completely full, so there might be some other things that I want to add to this list before the start of March that I can do in March. In particular, things that I might want to do while I'm in the US, so that is probably something to put on my brain dump. So I'll just put down an asterisk here to say more 101 things tasks. From there though, the next goal we have is the Washington DC trip. So it's effectively go to Washington DC. Some of the things that I mentioned in terms of metrics of success were trip photos, having things organized before we leave, having our itinerary planned, that kind of thing. So we can check off that I did figure out what forms I needed. I reviewed the accommodation, I did book the tickets to our different experiences, figured out which tickets, buy the tickets, done that. Write a list of things to buy, yep, have done that. Change money/cash passport, we've just decided to use our bank card, it's fine. Tipping app, okay, I need to do that because we don't do tipping in New Zealand really, so I need to get onto that one too. Figure out how to use the app before I go as well. It's probably a good idea. That one's more of a February task rather than a March task though, so I'm not going to put it on our little piece of paper here. Pre-trip forms said we've already done that. Organize transport to and from places. That one I technically have done. Itinerary is done. Set up my travel journal is done. Print tickets is going to happen before we go, so that one's fine. Might just highlight it anyways. Buy a bigger SD card is going to happen this week. Charging my camera is going to happen this week. Picking my camera I've already done, but we'll highlight it and then cross it off, so that's fine. A lot of these probably should have gone on my list for February, but they didn't. But they still got done, so it's okay. Book long-term parking we did not need to do because we're not taking our car anywhere. Writing a list of things to take is done. Video content stuff is done, so that's all good. So I don't think we're gonna have a lot of stuff to do in terms of this trip in March because we'll be on the trip. If anything, it'll probably be when we get back and it'll be like make photo albums and make video content. That looks good. For our next goal, this is the JCC meetup goal, which is also gonna be happening. So I might put down like a reminder in the event pages just so people, I don't know, remember that it's happening. Because everything else should be sorted in terms of this before March starts. And I do have my other goal, which is about live streaming, but that one's kind of incorporated in the community building goal, so I don't think I'll have anything to do for that one. Now as we've got our short list, we can actually put those into our actions list. I think that all of these I am going to keep, even though I know that some of these weekly tasks aren't going to get done while I'm away, but I can still keep them on the list for when I do get back. I always like to organize this list so I have my monthly and one-off tasks at the top, so I'm filling in those first, and then I'm going to put in a divider for my weekly and my daily tasks. For those headers, I just use washi tape to mask the page so that I can get crisp and clean boxes of color, and this is what I've done for all of the small banners that I have in this setup. Having my actions list actually populated before the month starts is one of the best ways to ensure that I actually get these things done. If the new month hits and I haven't populated it, there is a non-zero chance that I just actually won't fill in the actions list at all. So it's very much been a focus of mine to make sure I get it set up before the month actually starts. As you will have seen in the February action plan, one of the things that I like to do for my weekly actions in particular is have a space to track having done it for each week of the month. So if we flip back to our monthly log, we have 5 weeks that we should probably be putting on here, even though some of those weeks aren't full weeks, like majority of the week falls in March. So for those, I'm going to put the numbers 1 through 5 out for each of these weekly actions. For those ones, I'm not going to use the InkJoy. I'm instead going to use a Pigma Micron pen because it is waterproof, which means that when I go over it with the dot marker to indicate the completion, the pen isn't going to smudge. I probably could have used a thinner pen for those to kind of make it match a little better with the other text we have on the actions list, but that's okay. You can see though I do have some extra space on my actions list in terms of the one-off and monthly actions, mainly so that when I get back from my trip I have the kind of space to write down extra things if I feel that I have enough time to work on them. And also the aforementioned 101 things that might get added as related to my trip to the US. Now though, what we can do is move on over to the habits tracker. For this one, we are going to use these daily actions, and I did add one, so charging my camera, because if I don't pay attention to it, I know my camera is going to go flat while I'm away. For this part, we have 9.5 centimeters, so that's 19 possible actions to put on this habit tracker. 2 of those are these ones here. So if we flip back to my habit tracker from February, and see what we had on that one, and consider which ones we might want to bring forward, which ones we might want to kind of pause tracking. You can see that on this one we also had 19. One of those though was tracking my spending. So there's going to be one in this lineup that I don't record. And I think the one that I don't record is going to be using my journal, which I have with this little pencil icon, because I am going to be on holiday for a good chunk of the month. So I don't think I need to hold myself accountable to using my planner, but everything else on here is something I do want to keep track of. As you can see, I use icons to represent each of my habits, and because they are as small as they are, needing to fit into a half centimeter by half centimeter box, I am using a thinner pen to put these in. This time I decided to use the O2 Pigma Micron pen, just to ensure that you can actually see what each of those icons are. If I went in with the InkJoy, that would likely be a little bit too thick to really actually see the icons. As per last month, for my tracking of the no spend versus yes spend days, I'm using the little $sign, and for charging my camera, I just used a little camera icon. At this stage, I haven't decided how I'm going to check off the habits. I might do the same as my last month and do a little tick or a big black dot, or I could possibly use my blue dot marker. Undecided. I'll figure it out when March starts. After this though, we then had the posting schedule, and that one I can fill in some things on. Some of the items I post are very much day specific, so for instance the stuff on my YouTube community tab or in my Facebook group or on my Facebook page. And my Instagram schedule I have attempted to schedule out as far in advance as possible and have things scheduled to post while I'm away, which is quite a feat when you try and post 3 things per day on Instagram. Of course, some of these things are subject to change. They may not get released on the exact day that I schedule them for, but I am hoping for a little bit more consistency in actually fulfilling the plans compared to what I did in February. For filling this in though, it's just another opportunity to put on some music or put on some kind of background noise or like a background video and write these things down. Notably, this posting schedule doesn't include things like what I'm posting on Discord or what I'm posting on Patreon or what I'm posting on YouTube in terms of video content. This one is looking pretty good at the moment though. It is partially filled in. I still have obviously a lot more to fill in over here, and there are some other things that I want to sprinkle in amongst here. As mentioned, this one doesn't include a whole bunch of stuff. Most of those get put back in kind of this section, my kind of like monthly content calendars per month. So you can see like February's one and January's one, that kind of stuff. This does need to be filled in, but I'm not actually ready to fill it in quite yet. Also, spoilers. Flipping over, as mentioned, the notes page doesn't actually need anything done before the month starts, And then we're on to the review section, which does need its headers put in. One of the reasons that I didn't set this up as part of my monthly setup was I wanted to consider if I still wanted the same sections that I'd been using for February and January, and honestly I think I do. I think that these are actually working quite well. It's just now deciding on the spacing for each of them. I think probably for March I'm going to make the memory section a bit bigger so the wins, challenges and improvements can get a little smaller, but everything on this side of the page is probably going to stay roughly the same. This is another part of my journal population that just requires a whole bunch of flipping back and forth, and another opportunity for me to just put on some music, put on a background video, and just get to work. I find that the monthly migration process is kind of a balance between having some chill time in my journal, just pottering around in it, and also an opportunity to get into some deeper reflection about what's been going on, how am I feeling, what's coming up, what do I want to accomplish, all of that kind of stuff. If I had to name my favorite parts of the monthly migration process, it's probably getting my actions list sorted, because doing that just gets me a lot more inspired and motivated to work on my goals. Also filling in the content calendar and the monthly log, because that just makes me feel like I have a lot more clarity about the stuff that I need to do in the month ahead. I'd love to know, is your monthly migration process similar? Do you have some other elements in yours that you like to include? Or do you not really have an overall process at the moment? That's cool too. I'd love to know about what was going on for you in your journal. As you'll have seen though, for each of the different header spaces that we've got on this page, I'm again using that washi tape trick. If you want to do this in your own journal, do make sure that you use a washi tape that pulls up nice and easily from the page. You probably don't want to rip your page while you're doing this. You may have also seen that for each of the kind of bullet points on each section of my monthly reflection, I like to use different symbols depending on the information stored there. So for instance, for the wins section, I use a little tick. For the challenges section, I use a little cross. And for the memory section, I use a little heart. This is in no way necessary, I just think it's a little bit cute. We have all of the sections for the review or monthly reflection ready to go. So that means that as we progress through March, I can come in and fill these in nice and easily. Another one of those pages that I like to have set up before the month starts so that I can kind of hit the ground running with it. So the review is ready. The notes section didn't need any work. The posting schedule is pretty much ready. I just need to fill in the rest of this section and actually kind of plan it out and then fill it in. Then we've got our actions list and habit tracker ready to roll. The monthly log is ready and the projects list is ready, apart from the YouTube stuff, because spoilers. If you wanted to see more monthly review or kind of monthly reset processes that I've got, I do have a playlist of all of those in the top right here. Or if you wanted to see more content related to the goal setting in particular, the one at the bottom is where it's at. Click or tap on either of those and I'll see you over there.